Hello, everybody.
That's my coach right there.
Oh, nice.
Hey, Ray, how are you? We haven't seen you in a while.
Hello, I'm good. How are you doing?
Good.
We get everyone in, Paula? Everyone that was in the waiting room?
We got everyone in for now. I'll pop people in as they pop in.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. Paula, Megan, and I were super excited about this topic when we first came up with it and deciding what book we were going to go to and what we were going to pull from. And we thought about where we're at in the shifting market, what that looks like going forward. How do we proceed forward and think about that? And then you have mid-year coming up, right? Which for a lot of us is a reset time and should be a reset time, evaluating where are we at now? How do we simplify moving forward? Is our plan still the plan moving forward, or should we change? And all of that is to say it requires a good amount of thinking time to develop these questions to ask ourselves and to develop a plan to moving forward. And we've mentioned it before, and it always comes up, well, what are some of the things you do during thinking time, right? Which also could show up as planning time in some of our lives. So the immediate thing we went to was The Road Less Stupid, which is the book we'll be out of today. And we'll be looking at chapter 3, which I think really summarizes the activity that you can do during thinking time and implement, and really simplifies it. So we're going to be going through those 5 core disciplines of thinking that will help you and your teams move forward as we go through mid-year review, establish a plan for next year in this shifting market. Anything you would add, Paula?
Nope, that was a great intro into them.
Love it. So we also are thinking about staying in this book a little bit longer, just so everyone knows, but we'll see, because if you haven't read it, highly recommend picking up and going in. So I want to start with what I think is the number one most important topic when it comes to the core disciplines, the number one, which is find the unasked questions. Paula, walk me through this. What does this mean? Find the unasked questions.
Okay, I'll read what it says for you. Create a question that will result in clarity and generate better choices. So create a question that will result in clarity and generate better choices.
This is my favorite one. Can I chime in?
Chime in.
Yeah, so find the unasked question, I think, is one of my favorite ones because I'm a coach, but also as a business leader, like what I wrote in the margin here is this is what you're paid for. Like, better questions get better answers. And anytime you're a director of something, right, like this is part of why you make an income, is to ask a better question that leads to a better outcome. And then he literally, so this is the operations in me, he literally gives like a formula for it. How might I X so that I can Y? So operations loves the formula. Then we have that leadership perspective of we're paid to ask better questions. So if you didn't read the book, write that formula down. How might I X so that I can Y?
Yep. Yeah, and this part of it, so when we think of thinking time, right, we're talking about 45 minutes to an hour of uninterrupted focus time on these 5 core disciplines, right, within that. So what Megan's outlining and what they quote in here is Peter Drucker, which says most serious mistakes are not being made as a result of wrong answers. The truly dangerous thinking is asking the wrong questions, right? And I think sometimes we ask really soft questions instead of challenging ourselves with really deep, thought-provoking questions that's going to provide us with the answers we're looking for as we move through these core disciplines. So if we are coming up with questions like, maybe the question we come up with is, how do we get more sales? Right? That can lead you around a path that could get you the wrong answer you're looking for, right? And lead you in then to building a plan around what that could look like. So to give us an idea of what that could be, what could be a better question, a better way to ask that and to think about it during a thinking time? And Megan, Paula, you can jump into if you want or if you have some thoughts around that to add in there. But I would just love to hear, so if I had sales and my question was, how do I produce more sales? What would be a better thought-provoking question we could ask?
Megan gave you the formula. How might I blank so I can blank?
What are we thinking, team?
I don't want to get too far into tactic 2. So I'll just give like maybe a basic example. Since we picked sales, if we use the formula, how might I increase appointments so that I can generate more revenue versus just sales, right? So there's 3, if you did not read the book, I'm going to give you 3 more things I want you to write down, because this is our job, is to ask better questions, right? So a great question has these 3 things. This is straight from the book, page 11. It provides insight on what the actual problem is that needs to be addressed, which we get into in core discipline number 2, but that's one of the things. Number 2, it simplifies the problem and makes it solvable. So taking sales to appointments, right? Which we could have gone anyway. How might I increase referrals during the transaction so that I can increase revenue? Like, it's so much more clear how to solve the problem. And then number 3, it expands the possibilities available to solve the problem or improve the situation. So those are 3 common characteristics of a great question, that if you're thinking about how do I ask better questions so that I have a better strategic approach to my business versus a tactical approach, those three tips are gold.
I love that. So and part of that as we go in, so the core 1 was the unasked questions. We have the formula. We identified that the revenue, right, is, we'll use the example Megan went with, and we'll kind of workshop that as we go through it. So we had said that how can I increase appointment, or how would we do increase appointments so that we would increase revenue, right? Ultimately, it goes into what we're looking at. So the second core discipline is separate the problem from the symptom. So separate the problem from the symptom. All of us, in this example of what I had, I'm insinuating there was a gap, right? And there was a gap that I had to do to reach our sales, which we're all familiar with. We've been there at some point in our real estate careers, if not now, right? Where we're at and in that gap. The challenge becomes the question we want to ask, which I just asked at the very beginning, was how do I increase sales? Well, is sales the actual problem, the lack of sales, or is it the symptom? Meaning, right? And I'm seeing some head nods. Kathy, I've seen you stepped in there. It's a symptom, right? So the importance of that formula is to really start breaking it down. The second part of it, we have the formula, we apply it, and now we're asking ourselves the question, is that the real problem or is that a symptom? And I would even challenge and go, okay, so we came up with appointments. Let's ask a better question. Is appointments, which is a gap, we're saying there's a lack, is that the problem or is that the symptom? What do we all think? And Megan, do you want to write your question in the chat so everyone can see the improved question you started with?
Oh yeah, the formula from Tactic One.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Zach, is what you're asking, like, is it a different measure in that same formula? So like to get appointments, you need leads first. So how might I get more closings, or how might I get more leads so that I can get more appointments? Or I'm confused about what you're taking. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. As long as we've identified, right? So the book is going to say what you identified as a problem is actually a description of the gap. The gap is not your core underlying problem, it's the symptom. The symptom is what indicates something is wrong, but it does not shed any light on what is causing it to show up.
So I want to give a real life example of this, okay?
Yeah.
I have a team that everything's always an emergency. Like they're all running around with their head cut off. Like things are always happening. Like if fires are happening all the time, right? That's a symptom of a bigger underlying problem. So if you had a team, like you were running a team and you were constantly having things happen that were emergencies, right? They were just coming up last minute. Everybody was rushing to fix it. What would be, that's a symptom. What would be some of the possible underlying problems?
Lack of communication or vision.
Yep. Definitely something you could dig into and look at. What else?
Lack of clarity of responsibilities and expectations.
Yep. Awesome. What else?
Systems not put in place or not followed, so that everything goes according to the system. If you have exceptions all the time, Megan and I were talking about this morning, is some things have to be just the exception, not the rule. And the rule needs to be laid out and put in place and followed. Otherwise, you're just running around all the time.
Yeah. So you guys all see how the symptom goes deeper into a much bigger problem, and you guys all came up with great things to dive into to see what could be the actual issue.
So here's what happens, if I might insert myself again. Here's what tends to happen from a coaching perspective to teams where the deal or the leadership's not taking thinking time to answer that question. So let's take Paula's example. There's fires everywhere. The team rushes in to say, well, these are 3 things it could be. We're going to write a GPS for all 3. That's building a machine, and I see it all the time, right? We're building a machine to solve the problem that isn't. We don't actually know, like anytime we see that there is a gap, so here's reality, here's where we want to be, and we peer down into the valley, like what's down there, there's probably dozens of obstacles. The question is like, which is the right first obstacle for your team to address? And when we just shotgun approach and say, well, what could all the obstacles be? Here they are. Let's GPS the heck out of all of them. We spin our wheels, we get into frustration, right? Does this even working? Does this matter? Like we solved all these problems and it didn't actually improve our conversion rate or whatever it is you're trying to improve because we just took a shotgun approach at it, hoping that one would help versus stopping and thinking about how to get into strategy around the actual obstacle in the gap. We just want to like Spider-Man our way across the gap by spraying out lots of webs.
Yeah, we see it all the time. Well, even in the first example, right? And I love that it was brought up, but the very next thing we went to in the first example was, well, maybe it's just contacts. Well, again, that's very tactical, right? And our approach and our thinking. And it's not that it's wrong, but you might build a machine based around how are we going to make more contacts? And yet, why didn't we just do that from the get-go? Right? So the thought when you write down that thinking time again is that the problem or the symptom? So we're still in symptom mode when we're talking, or we're talking about why didn't we hit the contacts, or in this case, in Paula's example too. So if you notice why it's so important to take that time and really spend a good amount of time separating that problem from the symptom to identify what is actually going on, right? Which is the question that was proposed in the chat that Megan brought up could very well be something along the lines of agents aren't in the office to lead gen, right? Or it's not on their calendar, their schedule. There could be underlying reasons that would stop us from overall hitting the goal in which we're looking at. We go through. Tactic 3, check assumptions. I love this one. So differentiate the facts from the story I am spinning. And I think this one is really, really, really good when you go in there. Is one of the most frequent thinking time questions he mentions in the book is, what don't I see? What am I missing in there? And I love that part when you check assumptions, because I don't think it's ever what we get in trouble for what we know. It's what we know for sure that just isn't true. And I don't think we spend enough time thinking about that question of what don't I see in the business? How are you challenging yourself?
Yeah, I read, I'm sure all of you have too, about the Fierce Conversations. And that was a big aha that I had in that book is what happens if our perceptions aren't right? Like we may perceive or have this whole scenario built out. Well, it must be this, it must be that. What happens if that is just not true? So then you have to kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, maybe I need to get more information, maybe think more about this to have really a true foundation, not just a perceived false one.
And
I'm guilty as charged.
And what stories are we telling ourselves too, right? We see this a lot in real estate. So the one I love is all the leads in our unmet database are bad. We need new leads because those are all bad leads, right? All the agents convince themselves of that. And then you have a new agent come in and they start pulling business out of that database.
Blockbuster could have used this question. I had a chance to buy Netflix and thought it wasn't ever going to go digital. So always checking assumptions. I think one of the important things with that too is why community of growth and taking the time to also ask these questions in a group thing. So I know we're also talking about solo, but just in general, these platforms too are having that accountability is so important because it can also help bring clarity around what you're not seeing, right? And then you can take that back to your individual thinking time and apply it and go, what else am I not seeing? Really help you move forward when it comes to there. Anything else, Paula, Megan, you would add to check assumptions or to the group? Anyone experience that?
This is the one I think that, in my opinion, is specifically for me is the hardest because sometimes I don't even realize I'm making assumptions, right? Or I don't even realize I'm telling myself a story. So that's probably the one I struggle with the most.
Yeah.
I mean, Zach and I have like a real life experience like we putting together Inspired. We're like, oh, everyone wants a short 1-day event. Wrong. You guys want to be here for like 7 days. We were so sure we were right. And then we launched it and everyone's like, couldn't it be longer? Like, why is it so short? Our bad. Check your assumptions. Thinking time around, are you making assumptions?
Yep. So far, we identified the question that we want to ask. We have a formula, a model of way we're going to do that. We're now focusing in on separating the problem from the symptom, right? So we can ask a better question and start building a machine, identifying what that looks like. So now we're going to take some time and we're going to consider the second order consequences. And so we're going to consider the second order consequences. If someone was going to take a stab at it, what is the second order consequences?
And I'll rephrase that because I love the way they put this. It's the litmus test to help me think before I act.
So these are the, what is the upside? What is the downside? And the question that I really love that he asked in here is, can I live with the downside?
And I would bet that most of you probably do this a lot in your decision making, right? We look at the pros and the cons of a big decision we have, right? We compare the pros and the cons, and then we look at the cons and say, am I okay with the cons, right? Can I live with the cons? Are any of them deal breakers?
Yep. Yeah, and we're just listing these out. Ultimately, we can't really control the outcomes or the consequences, right? We can only control the choice and the decision that we make and being comfortable with what we come up with. So if we're looking at the potential upsides and we're giving that a yes or a no. If we're looking at the downsides, worst case scenario, going yes or no, and then ultimately taking those yes and no's, go, can I live with that? Right? Am I okay, depending on the directions that it can go, and a lot of times extreme directions, if you're writing those out and looking at it. This is where I think failing fast and moving forward really comes in to play, because a lot of us will use that phrase. We've all heard it, right? Like, it's okay to fail. You learn during failing, then you can move forward. So you want to fail fast, move forward fast, and you'll learn it and you'll grow. The challenge with that is, if you're not stopping, reflecting, and being okay with the failing and taking the lesson, then we've lost all the value of that. There's nothing within there, right? So I think this really focuses on, if you did fail, what could it potentially look like, and are we okay with that, so we can really take the lesson and the learning and then move forward with it.
I just love his little golf metaphor, and I'm not a golfer, so it's like easy enough for even us that don't golf to understand. So I'm just gonna, like, you know what, I'm gonna read it because I'll butcher it because I'm not a golfer, but it's so good, y'all. Y'all remember this forever. So he's talking about playing golf and this second order consequence idea, and he says, on the 16th hole, I hit my ball deep into the woods. After searching for several minutes, we found the ball nestled against a bush. In evaluating my next shot, it was obvious my swing would be awkward and very constricted. I looked up and noticed about a 3-foot gap in the trees that was in the general direction of the hole. The gap was maybe 15 or 20 feet off the ground and probably 30 yards in front of me. As I was thinking about attempting this miracle shot, Tom was watching me very closely. Keith, do you know what a par is? He asked. Of course, I replied. It's the number of strokes a good player should normally require on a hole. This is a par 4 hole. Then he asked, do you know what a bogey is? Since I play golf, this was a seemingly obvious and unnecessary question at this particular moment. 1 over par, I answered as I reached for the club I intended to use to pull off this incredible recovery shot. Right. Do you know what a double bogey is, Keith? Now I was getting irritated. I'm trying to concentrate on my swing and hitting the ball exactly right, and Tom is over there playing 20 questions with me. I mustered some degree of calm in my voice and respectfully replied, "It is 2 over par, Tom." Tom's answer has stuck with me for over 25 years now. No, a double bogey is a bad shot followed by a stupid one. So good. Like, we'll all make a bad shot sometimes. That's just business. But then do we slow down long enough to make sure we don't make a stupid shot immediately after that? Love that story.
Questions so far? Takeaways, ahas?
I'd love to hear somebody give an example of a bad shot followed by a stupid shot in their business. I've just had several come to my mind, so I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of fun. Think about it, you guys, like you start questioning something, you know, it's not really working, and you make a decision to prolong the pain instead of just cutting the losses and moving on.
I can't think of an example, but I know it has to typically do with an emotional decision that you're making because you're upset or you're frustrated and you don't think it all the way through of the adverse consequences that it also could have. I don't know if that plays in line with it, but that's usually what I think about with a stupid shot or a decision.
I would agree with that. I do think that usually there's emotion involved in that. Yeah, because if you're totally thinking without emotion, it's a much more logical decision.
Yeah.
I don't have a specific example, but so many times we make decisions just to get rid of the pain. And you know, just make the pain stop, and not really making like good quality decisions that might be, you know, it might continue the pain a little bit, but at the end it'll be better. And I just know, I mean, I've done it in my life. I just want to, well, I've done it in like switching jobs. I just want to get out of this job. I got to go to something else. And then whatever I go to next is a complete disaster. So then, you know, then you're having, you know, I was having to, all right, that's not a good thing. But so many times I think we're just trying to get rid of the uncomfortable pain, pressure, and not really sitting down and saying, okay, what would be a really good quality decision here that I would need to make? And so.
Yeah, great example where all these 4 or 5 disciplines of thinking would, like, if we slowed down and went through all these steps, right, you'd make a different decision. One of the ones that popped into my head was, hey, we have an agent who's not performing, right? So instead of just cutting our losses, right, moving on, getting a replacement agent, we do all these things trying to motivate them, to get their buy-in, to get them to do what we want them to do. Nobody's had that happen before.
Or admin, like take it like, you know, to the gut punch. How many of you have kept an admin on your team for too long that's underperforming, but you keep them around? It's too painful to get rid of them. So you even maybe knew when you hired them or moved them into the position, it wasn't a great idea. And then we just keep insisting that they're going to be there forever until they die. They're not going anywhere.
It'll all work out. They'll get it one of these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have and still do. Oh no. Oh no. Yeah, bringing it home. So, you know, when you talk about second order consequences, you know, what is that causing to the business to just refuse to let go?
See it a lot with the hiring process, right? I've seen that before too. Didn't follow a strict hiring process and then wondered why retention was low, right? When I'm hiring again and again, don't follow the exact process and wonder why I'm ending up with the same results, right? And why it wasn't different than what we expected. The stupid shot shows up quite a bit.
We're all gonna go put double bogey on our ball now. A private message to ourselves.
It is what I find interesting, what I love about it, even up to this point, is the importance of following this step. So during the thinking time, I don't think you can really skip any one of these steps, right? And initially, I would only use like 1 to 2 of the core thinking, or I would use half of it, right? Not the model, not following it. And the aha comes from how much you have to follow this step. And I think an order is really important to get to what you're looking at, right? Because I think some of those double bogeys we're bringing up and talking about could also be avoided if we would have checked assumptions, or if we would have identified, is that what's the problem and what's the symptom? If we would have separated that from there, it would also alleviate some of those second order consequences, right? The double bogeys that we make, a lot of that happens when we don't take the time to check the assumption, separate the problem from the symptom, ask a good question.
Yeah, you're right, because we have an agent who's underperforming, right? That's a symptom. Where really is the problem? Was the problem in the hiring process? Was the problem in the training like where's the problem?
Or the assumptions like, I can hit a golf ball through a 3-foot hole in the trees 30 yards in front of me. Like, did you stop to really ask yourself if that was an assumption you wanted to make about your situation? You know, it's a great point, Zach.
Yep. So all of those lead how, again, in the process, step 5, when you look at the 4 core disciplines, so number 5 is create the machine. And I view this one as the culmination of 1 through 4. So what I mean by that is that we're going to ask the unasked questions, challenge ourselves. We're going to identify what is the real root problem here that we're going after. And then we're going to check ourselves and make sure that up until this point, like, am I making an assumption here? Like, what do I need to know? What am I not seeing that I should be seeing? And diving in. And then we're going to consider what could happen. And am I okay with the result of that? Either way it goes, am I okay with it? And I should proceed forward. So what do I need to do? Well, the book describes it as creating the machine. And the machine's really broken down into 2 main sections, and we'll dive in the book and I'll read directly from it. But the summarization of it is you have the actual tools and the way the machine's going to operate to solve the problem, right? So the model, the system, the tool, and then you have the people who is going to do that and make the machine work and is going to be involved in that. And that is described really as the machine that's going to make it work. So during that process is where you would identify, as Megan said, I've checked my assumptions and everything. I decided, you know what? I can actually hit that golf ball 30 yards away. I'm going to go for it. I think we're in good shape. And then I go to build the machine on how I'm actually going to do that. And I look at the plan and I go, that's not going to work. No way, no how, when I go to actually do the plan and figure it out and write it down, can I make that work? Which brings us back to then all the way to the beginning of what different question do I need to ask to get a different answer so I can start working through the process again.
I want to read a couple things in here that I thought were really good. Clarity about the desired outcome and the obstacles preventing the achievement of this outcome are critical. I don't know if any of you guys have caught this, but when we're working on plans with you as coaches, one of the questions we ask you is what will get in the way of you achieving this? we're looking for you to identify the obstacles that are going to get in the way, right? So that we can address those obstacles up front. Are they obstacles we can get through, or are they obstacles that are going to, this plan's not going to work because this obstacle is totally throws the plan out of the water, right? But a description of the destination is not a substitute for the roadmap or the machine that will get you there. And you guys, in my opinion, DOOs are the roadmap and the machine that's going to get any business there. It starts to break down the roadmap in the machine. It says consistent execution requires dashboards, processes, best practices, standards, metrics, and accountability to measure the critical drivers, monitor the progress, reward the success, and coach, train the people operating it. Is that not your job description?
I like the bumper sticker. Shoes that don't fit are not a bargain at any price. A good idea that can't be executed is a bad idea. That's got family reunion sticker wrote all over it, coming back from that event, and Mega Camp coming up.
So true. And it goes back to all the first core disciplines, really, you know, when you think about it. This is a great culmination. It's also, Paula, this is my favorite job description for a director position. It's like, clearly identify where you are, where you want to go, identify the correct obstacle inside that gap to address first, build the machine that addresses that obstacle, fund and staff the execution of the machine. And that is basically like the world's best job. Like, apply that to any part of the business. That's what directors do.
Yeah. And depending if you're using a 411 or a 12-week year, like that's where after step 5, you've really thought about it. That's where either you as an individual leadership team can really develop a goal to go after that moves the business forward, right? Is after we've created the machine now and we've thought about it, and this is what we need to do forward. An example I see in this a lot is the hiring of agents. So we will, and so when you think about building the machine, right, part of it is we talked about that a plan that can't be executed is just a bad idea, right? It's a bad plan on the machine. Well, a lot of times we'll see a machine built saying that, okay, we're going to do X number of units, which requires us to have this many agents. But we don't have that many agents at the beginning of the year to start with. Right? And it's a bad machine from the start. When we go back and we look through on how we built that and how we worked, and then we wonder why we're behind mid-year or heading into it, and we go to the org chart, and a lot of teams we see it's because they had a bad plan that they couldn't execute from the get-go because it was based on having so many people in the business that aren't there when you look at the org chart.
So what questions are going through your mind? We're at the halfway point of the year, right? We're at the end of June, so we should be putting our goals together for next quarter. Like, as you guys heard all this today, what questions came into your mind to be asking yourself? What's your unasked question?
I have one is, how do we make up for a first half of the year that wasn't so great? Like, what do we need to do because things have shifted now? Now we got to figure out, because we're, at this point, we haven't reached our first quarter goals or first half goals. What can we do differently to reach our goals for the second half of the year?
So, you know, your gap Chrisanne? Do you know what the gap is?
A lot. Megan and I were just looking at it briefly today. I mean, it's quite a few. I'd have to look specifically. We haven't gotten nearly the listings that we should have gotten. And I think we're working on some reasons why, but is it even possible to make up the gap at this point? So I think we're going to have to really sit down and look at that and see.
So
Look.
throw a number of listings out. It doesn't need to be accurate, Chrisanne. Just throw a number out of what.
Okay, let me just. Okay, hold on. Let me just pull up I just had it.
While you're looking for that, I wanted to mention that in the last 2 weeks, we signed 12 listings. It's been nuts suddenly for listings. So maybe it is possible.
Yeah. Well, and we had 11 last week.
Yes.
And we have 3 this week. Yes. I don't know if that's sustainable, but.
Do you guys just realize what Janet did? She just said, check your assumptions.
Yeah, exactly.
I think a great practice, and even some of you have entered a thought in the chat box, would be, how do you design a thinking time session that helps you answer that question? Because we don't know any of the answers to the unasked question, the problem versus the symptom, the assumptions you're making, like any of it, right? So now that you've got these 5 ways to think about thinking on solving strategic problems strategically versus tactically, like how could you take your most urgent question and design a very productive thinking time session so that you come out of that thinking time session capable of building the machine, designing the machine that solves it. Hopefully that's the takeaway from today's Let's Chat, is how can we all go have a powerful session, thinking time session, that helps us move the business forward.
It takes practice. I found my first thinking time sessions when I first started doing this not very productive and felt very awkward, even with myself, right? Like I'm just sitting there with a blank piece of paper going, okay, what questions do I ask? Right, and most of them did not produce anything that was of substance or anything that I would consider, hey, a great question that really moved me forward, right? They were either pretty soft or pretty towards the top, not really diving deep or getting into what was the actual problem. And I say all of that just to give yourself some grace, because it will take practice. Like this will have to be a consistency practice that you put into place and schedule, not just a one-time event.
So what are you guys walking away from this call with today? We did way more of the talking than you guys, so now you guys get to talk.
I think my takeaway is that I have to think more before I act and ask better questions, and ask questions to get results, not just answers. Yeah. I like how you dig deeper and deeper and deeper until you really get to what is the problem that we're trying to solve? What is this question that we need to figure out? What's our plan really got to be?
For me, it was how, the question Megan asked, how my X so that I can Y, and just ensuring that X and Y are relative. I think oftentimes we ask those questions and X and Y are on completely different spectrums, or not relative at all.
You guys think this, do all of you think this would be beneficial?
Kathy does.
So did you guys all write down the 5 core disciplines, or do you need me to put those in the chat? I'll put them in the chat for you guys.
I feel like everybody's checked out like on a phone call or something. Where did everybody go? Come back. Paula's dropping, while she's dropping those in, I put the link to our MAPS Operations Client Community Facebook group in there. Scroll to the poll for book club. I threw 4 in there that clients suggested to me, but please feel free to add one if it's not on that list, and then vote. So let's pick our next book club. When do we want to say we'll have picked it by and announced it so everybody has plenty of time to read it, guys? Maybe by Friday? That'll be book club for August, first week of August. It's a luxurious amount of time since we normally only have the 4 weeks. One of the books suggested by Raf, who's not here today, was The Road Less Stupid. So that's on there too, which is all about thinking time.
If, and a suggestion, if you guys really liked what we went over today, that was 1 chapter out of the book. This book is, I don't know, almost 300 pages long. It's not a slow, easy read. There's a lot in it. I actually have it as a reference book. If you guys want to do The Road Less Stupid, my suggestion is we take a chapter a week and we go through it a little bit slower. The other reason I love this, Keith Cunningham wrote this. And he did a lot through the Great Recession, right? And he learned a lot of lessons through the Great Recession. And he talks a lot about what is pertinent to the shift we're going through today. So really a lot of this content in this book would be really great stuff for us to be covering as we go through a shift this year. So if you want my personal vote, that's what I say we do. Yet this is your guys' call, not my call. So you guys decide.
Like, go vote. And this is also on there. So this is Road Less Stupid's on there. Hard Thing About Hard Things was also brought up by a client, and it's the one that Gary Keller's, it's like required reading for his top 10% at the moment. Someone else brought up Profit First, which, you know, profit's always a good thing. And then 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And if there's another one you would like to cover, go throw it in, but do it before Friday. And then we'll be able to push that out so everybody can buy the book next week. Deal? High 5. I'm just going to assume you're saying yes. High 10.
What do we want to go over next week? What's our topic for next week? You all are on the call, so you all get to decide. It's your lucky day. Silence. Is that meditating?
What are we
We'll be
deciding?
meditating
Sorry,
in the call.
it's been a little hectic in here.
What our topic is for next week.
What powerful conversation would you guys like to be having with each other next Wednesday?
I mean, it'll be close to the mid-year review, which we already kind of had a call on planning the mid-year review, you know, and going through a little bit of that a week or 2 ago. I don't know. Redoing GPS for Q3, maybe? Like new strategies or new, like where to get back on track, starting with the new quarter. I mean, it sounds like a lot of us, we're behind 22 transactions year to date. So like, where can we make those up and how, and what's a new strategy? I don't know.
Another thought I had is guerrilla marketing strategies. Any tactics anybody's using that has shown a good return? Which
Those are
can
good
help
questions,
with
really.
Hannah's question too.
So do we broadly want to have the conversation like different ways we are planning to close the gap? Because again, like just from our conversation today, you could all have a different suggestion, which may or may not be appropriate for another one of you, but might spark some, interesting conversation and thought process.
We've got the leads pouring in. It's just having the people call them and convert them into business. So
Have you called Phone Fairy yet, Hannah?
it's on the list, okay?
Well, I talked to her last night and she's actually training ISAs that should be deployable for teams pretty soon. So reach out to her because you might be able, I put in a good word for you, might be able to get first on her list.
Thanks. Okay. Do
Just
that.
as an aside.
Si-
Call her
what-
today.
Megan, what was that again?
Phone Fairy, it's a ISA training company who actually will get into your database and convert them at the same time she's training your ISAs to do it. So she's phenomenal. She's coming to Inspired. She's one of our speakers at Inspired because her track record is just insane.
Okay, and if anybody on here has ISAs that do a really good job, that has any insight, I'm looking to connect. We're trying to bring on our first one, or not trying, we are going to be bringing on our first one. And I just wanted to get some insights on that, from comp models to best onboarding practices, et cetera. So if you do have that, please put your name in the chat or your contact so I could reach out to you. Thanks.
Okay, so are we set then for next week? Strategies for basically increasing listings is going to be the name of the gap, right? So increasing listings, strategies to increase listings.
All right. Guys, have a great rest of your day. See you next week.
Bye, y'all.